And it wasn't just a mismanagement. It was an utter, I mean, like I say this now, but it was just such a disgrace in terms of the use of charity. In terms, I think the greatest sin that was committed here wasn't the fraud of finance, it was the breaking of people's trust. And it makes me really emotional when I talk about it because I think about all the people who believed in this man, who believed in the charity, who believed in the work. Like I said, there were volunteer groups going all the time to this charity, to be a part of it and to experience what everybody else was doing and to really feel it and touch it and see it. And the founder had such a great way with people, for better or for worse. Believe it or not, there were also world religious leaders who were praising him and speaking about him, like as if he was such an incredible person. And so it was very difficult at the time that we heard this kind of fraud. It just like you think like there's no way. There's just no way. But I now look back and I remember there were two major donors who said, I'm not giving to this. I was so shocked. I was
You
like,
mean straight out? You
just
approached them and they said point
yeah, it was
blank,
like
not a
week
chance.
one. Yeah, week one, I brought people from my Rolodex over. I still say Rolodex. From my black book, I brought them over to the charity. I called them up and I'm like, hey, I'm working for this new organization. And this is going back 15 years already. And they
Hmm.
were like, yeah, I'm sorry, Elle, you're great, but I'm not giving to this. I'm like, they didn't say why, but I just thought there's something going on. So
Oh,
that
that
was
was a yellow flag or a red flag?
It was a yellow flag. It was definitely a yellow flag, but I thought, they could be wrong. Maybe they just don't like it. Maybe they don't like the
Hmm.
founder. And, I learned so much, on the side of like, what did I learn? In every charity has a founder, and sometimes they're guilty of founder syndrome. And that's a problem because, sometimes they just don't go. And then they cannibalize the whole organization and all its work and the identity of it. So that's not helpful. And really, you want it to kind of be owned by two groups of people. You want it to be owned by the people who give to it, who care about it, and who sustain it. And you also want it to be owned by the professionals who run it. So, you've got those
Great
two
point.
sides.
Great
Yeah, you've
point.
got those two sides of it, but it's definitely not owned by the founder. And so this guy was he founded it, but he just, like I said, everything he was everything was consumed by him and his ego and everything like that. But the financial fraud that happened was similar to a boiler room, like when you have, when people are selling stocks and bonds and things like that, and they're just fake, and so the boiler room just inflates the share price, and then everybody thinks that's the share price, and so that's what was happening is that he would say a unit of whatever it is they were giving away. Again, I can't give too many details, but whatever they were doing, a unit would cost, let's say, the reality is it would cost $1. He would tell the world that it cost $3. Now, on one hand, there's nothing really wrong with that because if you really wanted to be upfront about it, you could say, well, the dollar is for the services that we provide, and the $2 is actually to pay the admin and to pay for the building and that's absolutely fine as long as it's documented and as long as we talk about it. But what was happening here was he was saying it cost $5 instead of one. Two he would take for the admin, and the other two, I mean, one was for the services, the other two were to a completely different project he was running. Now, the project was a good project, it was a wholesome project, it was a lovely project, but he lied to the
It
donors.
wasn't the project that the donors were giving to.
That, again, the central cardinal sin here was the breaking of people's trust. And I
It's a
learned
betrayal.
it's
It's
a
a betrayal to
betrayal.
call it that cardinal sin.
Yeah, it's really a betrayal. And if in our lives we experience that on a personal level, and maybe we're guilty of it as well, to one degree or another. Not at this epic level. This was tens of millions of dollars, that he had kind of inflated, and then he was giving it to a different project, very worthy, but not the one that he told people he was raising money for.